Little intro to part two here. This video ended up being a lot longer than I intended to make it, but the reason why I found myself investing so much time and effort into explaining it the best way that I could is because I do know that there is at least one person who is interested in hearing it, and for me, that's definitely good enough, and they know who they are, and I greatly appreciate them, and that's all I need. You know, I don't need 1,000 plus subscribers just yet to fully invest in my craft. I guess this making videos and sharing my experiences is now a craft. There's definitely levels to it, and I'm definitely learning. And if you're still here with me, I greatly appreciate you, and I hope to see you around. Take it easy. Enjoy the video. I haven't done the experience any justice, and that's nobody's fault but my own. And I guess that's because I just feel like, motherfuckers ain't going to believe it. They're not going to believe it. What I think would make more sense is to paint the pictures of before and after, right? Because nobody, even now, nobody knows what the after is. I'm basically a stranger still. I don't. I just kind of came out of nowhere and just started dropping stories, and my story is I come from a lifetime of incarceration, a lifetime of government oversight. Um, like between the age of, I was in a foster home up until I was 10 years old. I got taken from my mom. My mom was a hell of an experience. A hell of an experience. I was beat. I was beat as a child. And I don't mean like, slapped around and, uh, you know, punched in the mouth and shit like that. Like, my mom was a victim of a very heinous, heinous crime. And so she's a survivor. And with anything extremely drastic like that, it's only natural for people to, if they can't accept it, right? If they can't move past it, if they can't come to terms with something, then they'll find ways to cope with it, right? Um, I have to admire the fact that the way she coped with it was, well, she has two ways that she coped with it. There was one that was unexpected, and I don't really think she had any control over. And then there was one that was very controlled, and that was that she taught herself, or she didn't teach herself, she got into martial arts, taekwondo, stuff like that. She had all her belts, all the way up to black. Um, I used to see them. She had like plaques and stuff on the wall. I thought my mom was a ninja growing up. She had nunchucks, ninja stars. She had all her belts on the wall. She was very proud of them. But that always seemed like it belonged to another person, because when you grow up with just a single mom, living on welfare, um, you, you just, you don't really know what to think. You're a kid. It's just life is what it is. And that's, we don't know any better until we get older and we see other families and other upbringings and other childhoods and stuff. And you start to look back like, damn, I had a really fucked up one. But so yeah, that was really cool. She got into martial arts and she was very good at it. She excelled, and I had seen her beat grown men's asses. I seen her beat multiple women's asses at the same time. Um, she was still very much a drinker and a partier. alcoholic. So the the inadvertent way that she dealt with the unfortunate event that she went through is her mind had compartmentalized itself. I always struggle with that word. I fucking hate that word. It basically partitioned off a piece of itself. And it became its own personality. Its whole own personality. And I met that personality every time she would mix her meds and drink, or not take her meds and drink, or I don't even know. I can't even honestly tell you to this day. I just know that she was cool while she was buzzed, but if she got past a certain point, this other person would come out. And this other person was not my mom. And she didn't recognize me as her son. She had a very signature thing that I always immediately knew that I wasn't dealing with my mom anymore. And that's when she started referring to herself in third person. Yeah. She used to call herself, this other person was Kimmy Cat. And so she would say, yeah, fuck that, Kimmy Cat don't play that, Kimmy Cat this, and Kimmy Cat thinks this and that. And I'm like, it's not funny. It wasn't funny then, and it's just, it's saying it now out loud, it sounds absurd to me. But I remember being terrified when I started hearing herself refer to herself in third person. And yeah, so I had this complete stranger in my house, locked in the house with me, who didn't know me, and she despised fucking men, like absolutely despised men. She was a straight up man hater. Not my mom. My mom loved the fuck out of me, and she still had love for my dad. But this other person was the result of the unfortunate event that my mom went through. Literally spawned from it. It was a hatred for men embodied. And when she would see me, she would, like, I guess, project or, supplant some men's face on my face. And she would start calling me, whatever the guy's name was. So, like I said, she wouldn't even recognize me as her son. So I got this, fucking third degree black belt woman when I'm like 8, 9, 10 years old. I was getting my ass whooped for as long as I could remember. I feel like I can only remember up to like 7, something like that. But yeah, I was already smoking weed with her by the time I was age 8. So yeah, I was getting my ass whooped long before that. But yeah, and when I say getting my ass whooped, I mean, like, I know from a very young age what it's like to believe you're going to die, right? I know from a very young age that laying in this much of your own blood probably means you're going to die. I've literally laid in puddles of my own blood caused by this woman, this imposter that, took over my mom's mind and body for hours on end. And the next day, my mom would see me, black eye, fat lip, split, whatever, and she would just bust out crying. Right? She a lot of the time she'd be like, "What the fuck happened to you?" And I'm like, "You happened to me." What new toy am I gonna get now? What new skateboard or bike or pair of Nike shoes, air pumps or whatever? What am I gonna get now? I had everything. as a kid who grew up in the 90s, I had my own TV, my own VCR, Sega, Super, the Nintendo like the regular Nintendo. I had, lots of shoes. I had a whole closet full of toys. All my friends were allowed to come over. I was allowed to go out and do whatever. I got raised through a very thick veil of guilt. But I did well, right? I mean, you get your ass whooped for nothing is just a part of life, and you grow up, looking at things a lot different. I never had to get chased down to do my homework and shit. I never had to get chased down to make sure that I, had clean clothes to her. Like, I did everything. She paid all the bills, but I took care of the house. I cooked, I cleaned. I was very self-sufficient from a young age. But I was getting my ass whooped on the regular by a woman who did not pull punches. Did not pull punches at all. Now, where I was going with that is I went through all that by the time I was 10 years old. And I got taken, or no, I was 9 years old. And then I ran away. They had to come to find me. They fucking scooped me up and tricked me into admitting that my mom was beating my ass because they had said that, she had told them to tell me it was okay. But yeah. And we ended up bouncing around in a couple of foster homes. And she permanently lost, a, what do they call it, custody of me. And I pretty much lost contact of her after that point. But she did manage to find my dad, who did not know he had a son. Can you imagine that? Just going about your day, going about your business, and, enjoying a nice little stroll around a powwow with your newly wedded wife, and some guy comes up to you and is like, "Hey, I seen your son. Looks just like you." What? I don't got no son. Like, he's like, "No, yeah, you got a son. I got a picture. I got a picture in the car. She gave me a picture to give to you, let you know you have a son." And he's like, "I got to see this." So his wife is looking at him like, "What the fuck?" So yeah, they walked over to his car, and he got the picture out and he showed it to him. He showed it to my dad and my stepmom. She looked over his shoulder and she looked at it and she was like, "Yeah, that's your boy." I remember thinking the first day I seen him, he came into the little room that they had us, little private room they had us meeting in for the first time, and I stood up and I looked at him and he looked at me, and I knew. I was like, "Yeah, look at that ugly ass mug. That's definitely where I got it." My dad's taller though, taller and darker, but same face, same long ass fucking chief nose. But so yeah, then by the time I turned 11, by my 11th birthday, I moved up there with him and his wife. And so now I went from a completely just desolate, unstable ass, volatile fucking upbringing where there was like literally no law, no rules, no fucking guidance, no nothing, right? To fucking disciplinarian type, like, I was being raised like I should have been by a father, you know, and that was completely fucking alien to me. Like, I was not feeling that at all. And as much as I loved the fact that I was finally living with the man that I had imagined would show up one day and right all the wrongs in the world, I still resented a lot, a lot at that point. And maybe it was him, maybe it wasn't, maybe it was my mom, maybe it was just, it was a lot. I had just been a helpless passenger, like a tumbleweed in the winds of the fucking universe, just blowing along. And I was getting really spiteful. I was getting really hateful, rowdy. And so it's amazing that I would be raised in such a manner and be like a straight A student and never got in trouble or anything like that, to the complete opposite, right? Complete 180. Now I have, you know, parental guidance. There's rules, there's discipline, there's curfew, there's all these things. And I'm not feeling it, right? So I start bucking. I start bucking hard because the way it is I saw right away that my dad wasn't willing to hit me. Not after what I said to him, anyways. But we got into it one day, and I'm like 12, 13 years old. We get into it, and I said something crazy to him, and so he smacked me right across the face. Wow. And like as soon as he hit me, I immediately looked right back at him, and I said, "Go ahead, hit me again." I said, "I've been hit all my life," and I just saw like something drained out of my dad's face. Like whatever he felt, or whatever the issue was at that moment, it wasn't important because he just had a realization. He stopped and he was like, "You're right. You're absolutely right." Because if it hasn't helped yet, it won't help now. And he walked off. And so I was like, "You're not, you're not gonna hit me?" It's like, bet. Hey, like if you're not willing to do that, I could do whatever the fuck I want. Because to me, that is the end all be all. If you're not willing to fucking, you know, leave me in a puddle of my own fucking blood, I ain't got shit to worry about. Because that was the bar. That was the expectation that was already set. It was already way the fuck up here. And he wasn't going to continue with that. He wasn't going to perpetuate that. He never. I mean, we fought. We fought when before I like permanently ran away, but that's because his stepmom was, or my stepmom, not his stepmom. That's because my stepmom was stirring the pot, and he caught her. He eventually saw whatever there was to see. He divorced her, but she was getting enjoyment out of all my struggles. She's just a miserable person, completely negative. She was so draining to be around. It was just always negativity. Like, wow. I don't know how my dad did it. I mean, whatever. But, anyways, so by the time I was 13, my dad had zero control of me. Zero control. And he'd already made it clear that he wasn't going to box with me. So all he could do was, report me where he could, because I was, I was stealing, I was fucking going out, I was getting drunk, and I had already known that if I was going to drink and get high, then I just wasn't going to come back to the house, because my dad had, well, for one, he's a pipe carrier. I don't know if a lot of people know what that means, but he's like, he's kind of up there with like a medicine man. You know, not every pipe carrier is going to be the best representation. Nobody is irreproachable. There's more. There's some are better than others, but my father is definitely a one of the exceptions that I've seen. He's still, I still admire him, even as a man. It took me becoming a man in prison to finally understand the road he walks, you know. And I got nothing but respect for it because I certainly couldn't do it. Not then and not even now. You know, if I were to carry the pipe, that would require me to make a lot of drastic changes that even now, I'm not really wanting to do. And I've already made a lot of drastic changes. And now that's kind of like what I'm getting at, right? I'm just helping you guys understand the before. So by the time I was 13, I had racked up just so many charges, right? Minor consumption, minor possession, fucking unauthorized use of motor vehicles, uh, criminal mischief, terrorizing. Um, the first four counts I got were burglary, breaking and entering, criminal mischief, and vandalism. Four counts, three each, 12 counts. By the time I was 13 years old, that's because our lot owner had one of my dogs put down, and he was part wolf. He was part wolf. And my lot owner said he got out while we were out. We were gone. So he had somebody coming by and checking on him and feeding him and stuff. And he was out in the yard and he jumped the fence. He got loose. And I guess they had him put down. I don't know. I didn't hear much because as soon as they said that he called the pound on him to have him put down or, whatever, I just saw red. Immediately saw red because I got. That's the thing about it. Where I was going with my mom is when you love somebody and they are the only thing they are the center of your universe. They're supposed to be, they can do no wrong, right? But I knew, pretty early, my mom could do wrong, a lot of wrong, and but that's your mom, right? That's your day one. You can't. You want to be mad at them, but you know, it's hard to when you see them crying and begging, and all this shit, and they're showering you with gifts and this and that. You eventually you just eat it, right? You just eat that shit, and it goes down. You bury it, and it festers. My drug treatment specialist in Beaumont said it better than anyone else has ever phrased it to me in my entire life. She said, "You can't bury barrels of toxic waste and not expect it to poison everything around it eventually." Because that was essentially what I had done. When you swallow unresolved issues, things you are not content with, things that you can't make peace with, when you're holding resentments, those things poison you. They get heavy. They get heavy real fast. It takes energy to hold on to those things. And the longer, the heavier. And it's also harder. It's harder to untangle it from the psyche, right? Because it becomes a part of your identity. It becomes a part of your character, your very foundation. I got vengeful on one arm. I got betrayed on the other. I got pain on one hand honor on the other because you can't get one without the other, and vice versa. I got an anarchy sign on my face. Like, what kind of what mental state do you think a guy has to be in to get died young on his fucking knuckles? Like, I was a lost cause, straight up fucking lost cause. But I was very angry at nobody and everything all at once. And so when my landlord had my part wolf put down, I went and broke into three trailers that he owned just off the main property. They were kind of further out in the fields, and I had three friends that were my road dogs, fucking Matt, Dusty, and Brandon. They were my partners in crime, but they came with me, and they helped me trash these fucking trailers. Like there was a bike in one of them. We started it up, did a fucking standing burnout, let it take off into a entertainment center. Like, nobody lived in these trailers, but they were like fully furnished. I'm guessing he repoed them or whatever, and he just had them sitting, you know, out out of the rent space. But we trashed them. We trashed them hard. We spray painted everything. We fucking were whipping CDs and records like frisbees. Said Mark sucks dick and fucking, big old tag lettering. Pig suck, oink oink, Slayer, anarchy signs everywhere. Like, yeah, he killed my dog, so I'm going to burn your house down. I think I've said that before in one of the videos I previously recorded. You don't get one for one with me. You get one for 10. If you stub my toe, I'm fucking chopping off an arm to get even. Like, that was what it was like dealing with me at a young age. I was extreme. I was extreme. But so I literally came in with a bang as far as criminal records go. I mean, I know I'm not. There's far more worse people out there than me, but like I said, I started young. So by the time I was 15, my dad also lost custody of me, and that was through no fault of his own. I hope he doesn't blame himself. Still, I've told him that, I said, you did what you could with what you had. You weren't given much to work with. I say, you basically were forced to watch somebody run off a cliff. There's just not a lot you could do. I was going to run off the cliff, and I knew that you wanted what was best for me. I was like, but I was filled with so much spite that I would do the opposite because it wasn't giving somebody what they wanted from me. And that's what mattered. That's what matters to somebody that has a problem with authority. We will cut off our own nose to spite our face. It's great. It's great living like that. Doesn't get you far. Doesn't get you much, really. There's a lot of trouble. Lots and lots of trouble. But yeah, so I was under court proceedings in our justice system. I was deemed a ungovernable child by the time I was 15, and so the state took me. They basically revoked custody from my father, and I became a ward of the state. That is why, when I said that I've touched down in every single juvenile facility North Dakota has, that's not a lie, because these places, they still basically charge your parents child support. I know they were charging him a portion of the fees of what it takes to house a child a day, and it's anywhere from like 80 to $120 back in 2001, 2002, 2004. I know at Home on the Range, which is a really nice place, I did stay there for like a month and a half and got a bunch of presents during Christmas and stuff. And I ran from there because I found out that it was like $120 a day. The only place that didn't charge my father was YCC, the Youth Correctional Center, which is where I stayed until I was 18. But otherwise, I ran from every single place. I have stories of absconding and outrunning the staff and getting separated by a train that was fucking rolling down the tracks. I timed it just right, like because they have a response time and everything before they get in their cars and catch up with you. And there was only one road in and one road out, and a train came by at the same time every time during a certain part of the week and stuff. And when I heard it, we would always be walking back from the chow hall to our unit, and the first time that I would hear the horn, "Aw, aw," like that, I'd be like, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and I would count to myself while we were walking, two single files back to the unit. And I would get to about 45, 50 seconds roughly before I would see it pass directly in front of us all the way down the road. And so I started, I had to figure out then how fast I could run in that same amount of time. But because it's, we're not going to be able to just take one of those little fucking wheel things out there and measure the distance and stuff, but I had already ran track and everything, so I knew that I could run a quarter mile in about 50 seconds. And that looked like about a quarter mile stretch. And I banked on it one day, and it paid off. It paid off. As soon as I heard that horn, I stepped out of line and I took my jacket off. And the staff looked at me and he grabbed his radio and he's like, "Don't do it." He's like, "Buck, get back in line." I'm like, "Sorry, man." I was like, I gotta go. And I kind of started trotting off, and then I'm like, "Man, fucking go." And I just booked it. And I knew that I had like 20, 30 seconds of a head start because they now have to run all the residents back inside, lock them all down before anybody else can run back out and start pursuing. So I had like about a minute tops. Sure enough, I got down that fucking road and I looked to my left and I could see the train coming, and I'm like, I'm not going to make it. I was pushing myself further and farther and harder than I had ever really pushed myself in any other 400-meter dash because, like, my lips went numb. I was seeing dots. Like my hands went numb, and I was like leaning too far forward. I was getting ahead of myself. I was stumbling, and I fucking tumbled over the tracks like seconds before the train went by. Whoosh. And I laid there for, I don't know, literally like a minute. That's how hard I pushed myself and still barely made it. And I sat up and I looked, and on the other side of the tracks there was a bunch of cars with the headlights on, and the guys are standing out, and they knew there wasn't anything they could do. They can't go around. Like, this is literally the only road in or out. I had successfully trapped them on the institution side, and I was free. And however long this train was, that's how long I had to get away. And we're only, like, literally, I ran down a ravine, up a hill, and I was all the way in some resident zone. Like minutes. Like they would waste so many minutes just trying to catch up. I was already gone. I escaped. But I digress. I think I was saying something along the lines of I was just bad. All right. And that was who I was. I was an escape artist. I did not care. I did not give a fuck. There was nothing that anybody could do or say that I would fear. Because if you weren't going to commit violence against me, I'm gonna do what I want. It's just not you're gonna, you know, like what do you take from somebody like that? How do you actually get through to somebody like that? You can't. When they have been beaten to the extreme, there's literally you have caused this child to contemplate his own mortality from a young age. There's just not a lot that you're not going to have very much sway. You know what I mean? But man, yeah, so I stayed in juvies until I was 18 and I got out. And fast forward basically 2 years. I was only free for 2 years, and I caught a federal indictment: conspiracy to possess and distribute a controlled substance, and obstruction of justice by retaliation against a federal informant. 14 years and 10 years ran, what is that goddamn word? Not consecutively, but the other one. Simultaneously. I can't fucking remember the goddamn word, but they were ran at the same time. And that's going to bug the shit out of me. But yeah, if they would have stacked those, I would have been gone 24 years. And that's why I say I've had so many instances in this life where I just barely made it. Right? Just barely. Only reason why I didn't get those stacked against me is because the ringleader of that federal case was already sentenced. He'd already told, and he was looking at like 16 years or something like that. And for as far as the judge could tell, as far as what they were only saying that I was a part of it, right? Kind of like a freeloader, um, glorified errand boy, basically. That's all I was peppered throughout 1,500 pages of discovery. But beyond that, they didn't have the right people to say that I gave them or got from them any large amounts. So I got lucky, and he wasn't going to stack the charges against me, because he said that he didn't want me, who was just kind of barely corralled in with the rest of them, to do more time than the person that was ultimately responsible for it all. Now, that's not true. He got in trouble and was mainly the one that made it really look really bad, but he was the glorified errand boy. And I'll talk about all that some other time, because this is already a long video. I know that I tend to make really long videos already, but fuck it. If you like it, you like it. But yeah. So I went to state prison right away. Not for the federal charges; those would come later. But yeah, I got raided in a hotel room because somebody said that I was either suicidal or waiting to be killed because of a meth deal gone bad. That was for verbatim what somebody told the police. And so they came and they raided me at that hotel room because they thought that I was holding someone hostage with a weapon. I don't know if that's the smartest thing to do if that were indeed true, but Hey, whatever. Anyways, so that's by the time I was 19. I hadn't even spent 2 full years actually free yet. And up until this point, my life has already been anything but conventional in the traditional sense, right? It's already been pretty obvious, right? It speaks for itself, right? The path it's taken, like it's all very in line with expectations given the circumstances. Nobody expected me to become an astronaut, you know. Nobody nobody expected me to suddenly be a straight A student. I was in line. I was in line with, you know, the numbers added up, and this is what it equals, and that's what checked out. I was an addict. I literally, I didn't have a favorite drug. I would literally just do whatever made the most money. First, it was weed, and then it was weed and coke. And then it went from weed and coke to pretty much all of it. That with meth, shrooms, pills. I was addicted to pills at the same time through all that. Painkillers. Uh, yeah, I was a fucking mess. I had no preferences. It was just whatever. Whatever I get my hands on. That was good enough. So I go to state prison, and I talk a little bit about that on my interview with Chad Marks on Blood on the Razor Wire TV. Um, I spent out of the what I was in state prison for about 16, 17 months, something like that. I'd only spent about 2.5 months actually free on that yard because I got three assaults while I was there. Immediately, one was like the next day I was out, and then I went back because they have like a contract. You can't get like so many shots of a certain caliber or whatever, or certain severity. But if you commit another assault, and it wasn't an assault, it was a fight. It was a fight, but you are an assaulter if you are the winner, and they just charge the other person with fighting for getting their ass kicked, right? Whether they fight back or not. They basically expect you to like run the other direction and dive between the fucking CO's legs to not get a shot, I guess. I don't know. You cannot swing and still get arrested and taken to the SHU because they're going to investigate you. They're going to find out. They're going to hold you just as long as they're going to hold the guy who hit you. It's crazy. So they immediately violate my contract, and I go back for another, like, and you're going to do as much, if not more, than what you did the first time. So the first time I did 6 months. So the second time I did another 6 months. And on my third assault, the warden came and saw me, and he was like, "Don't even worry about coming back out of ad seg." He's like, "You're done. You're here for the remainder." And I was like, "I don't give a fuck, dude." I was like, "I'm indicted. I'm going to the feds. I'm looking at 30 fucking years, dude. You think I give a fuck about this podunk ass, scary ass fucking yard? Like, fuck you. Get the fuck out of my face." You know, that 70s show is on. Yeah, so I didn't care. I did not care. And that would bite me in the fucking ass because, like I said, they ran the sentences concurrent. That's the word. Fucking A's. I finally remembered it. Not consecutively, but concurrent. They immediately started my sentence, my federal sentence, while I was in state prison doing 10 years for another conspiracy, or not conspiracy, it was, shit, what was it? It was a intent to distribute? Yeah, it was. It was a possession with intent to distribute. I had like a wasn't. Really a couple balls of glass on me, I think. And I was in violation of another meth charge that I had. But yeah, so they gave me like 10 years to do. And because they ran the federal sentence concurrent and started immediately, it was now on my state prison to decide whether or not they're going to keep me or parole me to the feds. What do you think they were eager to do right away? They fucking shit my ass. And he came to my cell and he was like, "You fucked up." He goes, "You could have served out your entire state sentence here. We could have paroled you towards the end, and you would have only done." By then, he knew I had 14 years, so he's like, "You could have done 2 or 3 years in the feds." But you had to, you had to fall in line with the wrong crowd. I did. I joined up with like the most notorious fucking gang there, which is why I was in so many assaults. And he's like, "Yeah, you could have hung out in your own fucking home, in your own backyard. Got all that time out the way." I suspect he knew. I suspect he knew exactly what I was in for. Cocksucker. But man, it's gonna be a long video. So I go to the feds. At this point, do any of you think, based off what you know of my upbringing, is there any hope for somebody like that at that point? They now have to make it through 14 years in federal prison in the native car, full-blown addict, you know, absolutely no self-preservation whatsoever, no respect for himself, no love for himself, no ties with family, like literally I just been bouncing around, just indulging in whatever I could find, wherever I could find it. That's pretty much my life that I've lived up to this point. It's about self-gratification, instant gratification. Now, I'm going to fast forward. Now, I have a full-time job that I've been at. I've already been out 6 years for one, so I mean, the odds of defeating the recidivism rate over the course of 5 years of paper, that's already a tall order. That's a very fucking tall order. No infractions, no violations, no, not even. I refused to drive while I was on probation, except for like the last year that I was on paper. But I refused to drive. I refused to do a lot of things that would have provided more sources to involve yourself with the law enforcement, right? Because anytime you get in that car now, you have the potential of being pulled over, and depending on how they feel, they can smell something, right? Or see something, or maybe you seem nervous. What do you got to hide? Ask a bunch of unnecessary questions. Where are you coming from? Where are you going? Have you been drinking? If they pull you over because you're swerving, they have a right to ask if you've been drinking. But say they pull you over because your window tint's too dark, and now they want to know where you're going, what you drank, who's all with you, all that shit. It's like, you don't need to know that. Stick to the reason that you pulled me over for. But you start talking like that, they're going to have issues. It becomes a dick measuring contest. And more often than not, you're not going to win, not unless you are completely legit. I had learned in prison that you are untouchable. So as long as you are legit. Now, being legit in prison is a whole different. It's a whole different thing, right? It means you put in work, constantly, without hesitation. You check people, check people's paperwork. You do what you're gonna say. You're at all the meetings. You're working out. You're, you know, helping bros out. You're demonstrating strength and unity. Like there's a lot of bases you got to cover to be considered a solid dude in prison. But what about out here in the free world? What do you got to do to be like that in prison? Well, you got to pay all your bills. You got to hold a job. You got to pay taxes. You got to have all the insurances and the SR22s, and you got to pay all the fines. You basically you got to jump through all these different hoops. But at the end of the day, so long as you have covered all your bases, nobody can tell you what to do. And that is what I enjoy. That requires that I follow laws. That requires that I pay money whether I want to or not. It requires a lot of things. So how does somebody go from a lifetime of destructive self-gratification to suddenly the most responsible, law-abiding, righteous motherfucker out here? Yeah, I'm not a righteous motherfucker. I know that I don't cause anyone issues, undue issues, because I don't want any undue issues brought to me. I don't fuck with people. I don't talk bad to people. I don't disrespect people. If somebody out here is unbearable, just walk away. Fuck them. Cut them out of your life. It's that easy. Never talk to them again. Lose their number. Block them. Whatever. It's a lot more easier to tend your garden out here than it is in prison, because in prison your worst enemy can come post up right next to you, and you got to endure it. You got to endure every little furtive motion that they make towards you. You can't touch them. You can't touch them until they fuck up. They really fuck up. So it's just a constant game of cat and mouse. So now I built myself a life out here that allowed me to buy a new car, get a home loan. You know how good it feels to walk into a bank and say, I need a couple $100,000 because there's a house I want. And they're like, yeah, sure. Just fill out this paperwork. Here's your key. Here's your new car. I have more now than I ever did being a drug dealer. I have more to show for my efforts today than I ever have at any other point in my life. So, now all of a sudden I have the most amount of responsibilities that I have ever taken on. And I juggle all of them very well. We got 2 new cars to pay. I got 3 dogs, 1 cat, an amazing girlfriend. My in-laws living downstairs. I make sure we all have everything we need. We all work. We all have pets. They have a dog too. I have yard work to tend to. I have trash days, spring cleanup. I got all these different bills to pay. I have a lot. But the person that I just spent the first 40 minutes describing to you is not exactly the epitome of responsibility, is he? And yet here I am. So something happened, right? Something had to have happened that would completely change somebody from what I was to who I am now. And no, it's not overnight. Well, usually. But in this sense, it was literally overnight. And that's because I watched my body fight to stay alive for about a good 45 minutes. And during the time that I was out of my body, I just suddenly remembered. I remembered that this was all supposed to happen. Like my life, even as turbulent and unsavory as it has been, it was all according to plan. Copy that. But it was all part of a bigger plan. And I knew that. Like I said, it wasn't, it was like suddenly I realize I'm outside my body. And I look over and I see my body and I see I'm fighting to stay alive. And then I'm like, damn, this wasn't what was supposed to happen. This is a waste. Because I knew I was dying for whatever reason. I knew it. When I say we are stripped of the knowledge, I literally can't tell you what it was I knew. But I remember, like, kind of like scrolling back through like a Rolodex of information, and it was so massive. And it's like we as regular people, regular guys, human beings, we can follow a train of thought for a good distance, right? We can pull on a thread and we'll get a couple things out of it, and then it kind of peters out. Our ability to hold a train of thought and connect the just connect everything, right? Like I was able to connect everything. And suddenly I realized that like I understood life, the point. If I had to guess, life is about pain. It is literally about pain. It's about learning and finding meaning in the sacrifice. Because without pain, we would never stop to reflect. Our entire life, we spend trying to avoid it, trying to avoid injury, right? We are wired and geared to fear pain. But ironically, it is exactly what's required to grow. I can't really say what it was I understood while I was out of my body, but I know that there was a moment where I was like, ah, this makes sense. all of this makes sense. Like life, the point, like we were on track, even as fucked up as everything as we were on track up to this point. And there was reasoning, there was purpose, and I knew what those purposes were. And like I just I can't explain it. I just know what it. I remember that I I remember a moment where I was like, oh, okay, I understand everything, but this is unfortunate. This is a waste. I wasn't panicked. I wasn't screaming, or anything like that. I was perfectly calm. There wasn't anything that was it wasn't unusual. Like even the entities that I knew were behind me that were waiting for me, it's like I wasn't even concerned with who they were because I felt like I already knew who they were. It wasn't an immediate concern, but I don't know who they were. I just know that I didn't have to look at them. This was more important. Watching the body die in front of me was more important than whatever mysteries were waiting. When I found myself back in my body, I it was still some time before I was able to, for one, let go of the top bunk. I had death grip on that thing, and it had probably was the only reason I didn't fall forward on my face on the floor. Um, I know my hand hurt, my whole body hurt because I think I was just seizing on the spot. I was drenched, covered in sweat, shirt soaked, like I'd been playing 3 hours of handball in the fucking California sun. It was it was crazy, and like I said, it was some time before I came down from the high enough to be like, okay, I'm I'm all right. I'm gonna be all right. But physically, I was gonna be all right. But I had a lot to unpack. I didn't sleep that night, and it was only around midnight at this time because the clock was like 11:40 something when I first looked at it after coming back from everything, and it was after 12 so at some point before I was able to get up from where I was sitting and start pacing around the cell. But it was at that time that I realized that I couldn't recall any of the profound revelations that I had just had. I just had the residual effect of the moments of clarity. That's all I have today from that whole experience. I just know that I did know. I did know at one point in time, and I accepted it, and I was at peace, and that I was smarter in that moment, that I knew. I remember that the knowledge that I had access to, I had already known before. Whether it's before this life, or we're just cycling through, or whatever it is, I do remember knowing, oh, I already knew this, but I had to forget. I had to forget while I was in the body, while I was living this life. That's why it's like, and it's not like you're flooded with all this information again. You're aware of the whole plan. You know what I mean? Like you're aware again that all this had a reason to it. And that's as simple as I can put it. You know, when you don't know what's going on and then somebody explains it to you and you're like, oh, okay, I don't have to trip. That's exactly what I felt, but I felt it while I was watching my body die, and I was out, kind of waiting. I was waiting to see it through. I wasn't right for a while. The the things that stood out the most to me while I was pacing around my room that night, or my cell, is I knew for a fact that I would live the rest of my life in prison if I couldn't stop getting high. That was just that. It was that simple, and it was that certain. So that's what I was left battling throughout the night. That it's like I was told what my choice was: either do this or spend the rest of your life in prison. And it's like I that's pretty much what I walked away from with that night. I was basically felt and shown this is all you will know if you can't stop, if you can't decide to stop this now. And it was done by a very startling way, you know, because we hear everybody says that to us, right? If you can't get your shit together, you're gonna be a fuck up. Everybody says that to us. But to experience it on that level, that's scary. When you know what you know, you're either going to embrace it or you're going to deny it. And initially, I denied it. I definitely denied it, which is really hard to do because you already know what you know now. you can't you can't go back to that. And that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to scramble back to the safety and security of ignorance. I was ignorant all the way up to that night. And like I said, just with the few things that I left that experience with, make it feel like I'm not even the same person. I'm not. I definitely not. I came back. Who's standing here before you now talking to you? I was the one who came back that night. I can't really account for much before that, other than to, you know, repeat them as I remember it because they are my memories. But like, I'm just not the same person. I'm definitely not the same person. That night was extremely jarring. It was extremely fucking jarring to my senses. Like, I was so far gone out of my comfort zone, even in the safety of my cell and, you know, drugs in my system. Like, I think I was completely sober after that. Like, I whatever I had was on and what I had taken, that shit was done. Like, I was dead sober when Dale walked in that next morning and he see me. He had all my shit packed, and I figured if I moved to another unit and just pretend that I didn't see or hear that and nothing happened, and I just, you know, continued the way I was, you know, going, you know, because I was getting time done like that. That's the thing about it. Time was flying. I was. Somebody told me that in a state prison. They said, "You want your time to fly? Next thing you know, you're just going home one day, just pick up a heroin habit. Now, that's not a, you know, there's obviously more reasons to it than that, but he was not wrong. Years just slipped right through my fingers like fucking grains of sand. Shit's crazy. You'll spend your whole life thinking you got all the time in the world to do all these things that, you know, you want to do. And what's scary is you really don't. That shit, the time flies like that. It's not, it waits for no one. No man, no woman. Get with it or get left behind. But yeah, that AI discussion on Brycel's rights video, I really, I it spoke facts as far as I could tell. As far as what I know from what I experienced, the fact that it said it's knowledge that we already knew and that we forget it and we just kind of cycle through here and all that. Like, I, I can't disagree with it. Not from what I experienced. And what I experienced was strong enough to completely change the individual. Completely change him. Now, just because I had this complete, 180 in character and, I had like this spiritual awakening, it doesn't mean that you immediately get to employ these tactics, right? Because I'm still who I am. I'm still where I am. I'm still addicted to what I have, And that's why I say it felt like waking up in another person's body. You basically unpaused somebody else's role-playing game. That's what I did. I feel like I just grabbed the controller and I started playing, and I got to find out that this dude is fucked up. Fucked up all the side quests, and it's crazy. I had to repair it. Starting from that night, I had to start making an escape plan to rectify the trajectory that this life was on. And that wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all. But the way that the events happened, because I had this awakening, right? And that's fine, that's cool. But now what? Now what are you going to do with that? It really wasn't up to me because I already had this beef brewing, and it was within the same week or so that would take place after I had this awakening, we'll call it. And that's already been in the works for like a year now, right? So that takes place, and I go to the shoot. Now, I was able to basically forcibly withdraw in the shoe. And from there, I went straight to SMU. And SMU is where I think I like fully got right, like balanced, like I was healthy, I was sober, I was reading and writing every day. Like, I didn't have to worry about shit because you only have the guy you're in a cell with and the people that you go to rec with. But when you know how to move, you have fewer times to worry about, getting got, basically. I still knew how to move and everything. There was nothing so different that, suddenly I didn't know how to operate in prison. I still did. But to wrap everything up here, what I'm basically saying at the end of the day is that the trajectory that I was on, the choices that I was comfortable making, what I was content with was basically everything a normal person should strive to avoid. I was a very self destructive person, and I had absolutely no self preservation habits whatsoever to speak of at all. And that was a pattern since as early as I could remember. And it had turned out exactly, you know, how everybody would think it would turn out. But something happened. I've always said it, prison didn't reform me. Federal prison did not reform me. There was nothing whatsoever, any aspect or facet of that institution that even remotely encouraged me to better myself. You are literally just one of many, many numbers in there. You're just a bleeding cow in the middle of thousands in a field trying to get the attention of the farmer. You're a drop in the bucket. So at no point in time do you ever feel like they've set their sights on you and try to make you try to prepare you for the world and stuff. They'll talk to you a couple more times towards the end, you know, but for the most part they just got to be seen by you maybe once a week. So if they walk through the unit and they take off, and that was them there. That was your opportunity to program with them and get updates and all that stuff. But nah, it's up to you. It is all on you to decide how your bid is going to be, how your life is going to be, whether or not you get out, whether or not you leave stronger than you came in, more equipped, smarter, more knowledgeable, more mature. But the environment that we inmates make it on each other, it is a breeding ground for, well, pain, suffering. And pain and suffering are the catalysts for truth, for learning and understanding. Because we as humans do not learn without some type of hardship, struggle. It's exactly why we are, faced with problems and equations in school as we're younger. Because it is the, what's the word I'm looking for? It is the process of, I guess, wrestling with a concept. But no, it's definitely something that there's just no getting around it. People that are considered really wise are usually people that have had really hard lives. You've never really seen somebody who's had a very uneventful life come to any, gripping revelations. Gripping revelations only come from extreme situations where you're pushing the boundaries of right, wrong, moral, immoral, and there's plenty of that in prison. There's plenty of times where you'll question whether or not what you're doing is right, whether you're good or bad, whether or not you believe you belong there. I believed I belonged there. I really did. I believed that I was supposed to be in prison. I was made for it. I did too well at it. I was too comfortable. It was too familiar for me, which is really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate that somebody would grow up feeling like that. But like I was saying, be that as it may, it was the complete lack of oversight through the federal prisons that allowed the rampant convict, uh, the whole convict lifestyle to, just completely run, our everyday lives, that allowed the overindulgence of said drugs and politics and stabbings and assaults and all that stuff. Because with it, were it not for my ability to completely overindulge in these things, I would have, it might have taken longer, a lot longer, for me to grow out of it. Because yes, on some point, on some level, I did want to fight. I did want to politic. I did want to be right in the middle of the action, and I wanted to kick asses and take names, and I wanted everybody to see me doing it. I wanted them to talk about it for weeks, months later. I wanted it to precede me, when I got to a yard. I wanted all those things. But like I said, were it not for that, I would have never been given the opportunity to end up having the experience that I did. Because like that AI program said, we would come to realize that we already knew, with the whole thing about consciousness and consciousness experiencing itself for the first time and all that stuff. I was convinced of all that before AI ever, started popping up on the capacity that it has been popping up on social media. I was convinced of that back in 2014, 2015, for a decade now. That's how long my experience ago was. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. I don't even know how to feel about that. It's been that long. 10 years. 10 years since that fateful night. But let me find this and get back to y'all. So yeah, it's kind of remarkable that even the enablance of the environment, which allows us to overindulge and just more and more crime, is all we're doing in there. We're just committing more crimes on the daily, literally on the fucking daily. Like, we are committing multiple felonies on the daily in prison. That's literally what it is. Like, And we're even better at it because we're being watched, we're being recorded, we're being listened to, we're being like, and we're not getting caught. I didn't catch no extra charges while I was in there. Well, one, at the very beginning, that's because they put my informant in the same fucking block as me. I had to do something, you know? I just. So, it's funny that I would say that during the time that I was out of my body, that I understood that everything, happened for a reason. And it does. Going to prison and being able to overindulge and all that is exactly what snapped me out of it. Just like that one night. Because without the ability to just go willy-nilly, and without the ability to, be handed whatever I wanted when I wanted it, you got to have money to get high like that in there. You got to have a lot of money to get high like that in there. I was on heroin and opiates for years, and I spent well over a year trying to come off the shit. Like, I tell you, you do some real life fucking soul searching when you are locked in a cell for 2-3 weeks, just going fucking through it, sick, can't sleep, won't sleep, even if you're taking somebody else's sleeping meds. It is your own very personal hell. That's why I say that hell is on earth. Each one of us can live in our own separate hell. And it's something else. I experienced it inside. I know what it's like to be just the lowest that you could possibly get. And it's because of that I decided something had happened, and I was like, this is enough. I can't keep doing this. And that experience was enough for me to completely 180 overnight. And it took a long time to untangle myself from all the remnants of that life and that old personality. So to hear AI in today's age, a decade later, stating something that I had found out for myself and changed my life over, it's pretty remarkable. It's pretty remarkable. Whether or not anybody's going to believe it, it's not for everyone, But you don't always have to experience everything for yourself to not take some of the knowledge from somebody who's gone through it on their own. One of the best things you could do is learn from somebody who has learned the hard way. If you can't do that, life's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard for you. I don't really know what the point of that is. What is the point of saying there's more out there? Is it to do better? Is it to try harder? Is it to be kind? Become something? Amount to something? No. So that you don't stop looking. If nothing else, it's so that you don't stop looking. Don't stop listening, watching. There's something out there. There's definitely something else out there.